As a young child, my parents excited me about travel and travel as a school. And I remember going to Sweden in 1961. Sweden hadn't seen many black people. Literally, Swedish children followed me up and down the streets. I remember first feeling a bit embarrassed and then feeling a bit angry. Then I realized, but these are just children. They wanted to know who I was. They couldn't be blamed for the fact that they were so excited about seeing somebody black. That was a great lesson for me. One who has struggled with these race questions all my life. I have never made white people my enemy. It's a question of us learning from each other. In the Chicago area, I've now taught for about 40 years, even though I've been in and out of Chicago, and I've taught at close to 10 or 12 different institutions. I came from a family of teachers. My parents both taught, had 3 aunts and uncles that were teachers, and I think it really is a function of falling into that as opposed to choosing that. I'll never forget the 12th grade teacher I had, who, for instance, said to me, "Prexy, someday I want you to take me to Africa, because Africa is a place of the future. And I think you will be very..." Because I'd done some papers already, grammar school and high school at Parker School, about Africa. He was one of the people that instilled in me a thirst, a longing to learn, to read, an excitement about learning that I've never been able to thank him adequately for. The Antioch Education Abroad program discovered the University of Tanzania. That was my first trip to Africa in 1965, and 3 weeks ago I just finished my, I think, probably 103rd trip, 104th. I met a group of South African refugee students who some of them had walked from South Africa all the way to Tanzania fleeing apartheid, and they were going to university there. And this was 2 years after Nelson Mandela had been convicted of high treason by the South African government and jailed for life. And he gave this incredible speech, "Why I'm Prepared to Die." And students that I met there in Tanzania had obtained a copy of that speech. And we listened to it on a 78 record again and again and again. And these people taught me about South Africa and about what you got an education for. And it wasn't about just making more money. It was about how do you contribute to making change? How do you contribute to making it better for everybody? Not just you as a privileged person making more salary. I think that there were so many people around me that provided a model of how you lived your life that I just assumed this was the way one lives one's life. I don't think there was no point in which I made a conscious decision. This is what I will be like. In April of '68, Dr. King was killed. My mother, who was a dyed-in-the-wool pacifist, said to me as I walked in the house, "Why aren't you on the streets protesting?" And I was shocked because the streets were very violent that night that King was killed. But my mother was angry. And because King had worked in my family's church on the west side of Chicago, I had worked personally with Dr. King. in trying to organize here in the city of Chicago, very closely with him. Spent a lot of time with him. And I think that was a foretaste of others that I would work with who would be killed. Great leaders. I had the great pleasure of working with a man named Amilcar Cabral, who was one of the greatest of Africa's revolutionary leaders, perhaps one of the world's greatest leaders. Tremendous theoretician, great leader from Guinea-Bissau. He was assassinated in January of '73. I had the pleasure of working with Eduardo Mondlane, the founder of the Mozambique Liberation Front, Frelimo, that fought against Portuguese colonialism, and I worked for them. And Eduardo was assassinated in February of 1969. So the experience of seeing movements and peoples lose their great leaders was one that I saw, I lived through. The contribution made by these great leaders to much more than their immediate people, but to the whole of the world, to history, has been one that I have been very lucky to be a part of. In my life, for instance, my sons got to have dinner with Nelson Mandela. In fact, one of my sons, I tease him all the time. Mandela said at one point, my son Jelly, what do you want to be when you grow up? And my son, who was then maybe 8 or 9, said, the King of Africa. And Mandela looked at him and he said, well, Jelly, the King of Africa, that's a bit of a difficult, but we'll work on it. Mandela was just that kind of, and all these leaders that I knew, one of their great capacities was that there were no people too small or too ordinary. It was a measure of their leadership that they made people feel huge and big.
And while I'm happy, my heart is also sad. I'm sad because I had a sister who was about your age. She died of violence. She died of the violence that we know together in our communities. Because as you have violence here, we have violence in America.
Yeah.
And so we know tragedy too.
Yeah.
I keep wishing in my heart that my sister could be here with me, experiencing you now. But I think what I ask of you instead is that you work hard and keep moving forward and keep pushing and studying and striving to make South Africa better and better and better. And we in the United States, we will do all we can to make the United States better and better and better, and also to make South Africa better and better and better, because we are interwoven. It's all one world today.
I have an enormous faith in people. There may be horrible things that people do. And there are. History teaches us that some of the things done by people to one another are horrible, but they have to be dissected and analyzed and understood in order to see that it was not just the result of, quote, people, but it was the actions of specific people, persons taken against people. And I believe very much that people come back, and that there is a sense of right that's very strong. It's like a flame that's deep inside of people, living their struggle, and that their struggle that's sometimes overwhelms you and gets you down, and it seems so big. But I think that it would be a big mistake to just dwell on that and to instead focus on the fact that there is struggle, and that struggle asserts itself again and again and again. You know, it's that message that comes out of the struggles that I've known in Africa. Luta, Continua. The struggle continues. But in Angola, they contributed another kind of version of that. And they said, a vitória continua, a luta é certa. That victory is a process. It's something that continues. There's no finite point you reach. But that a definite component of that process is struggle.